Hey, my name's April and I am 16. Recently I was totally scared because I thought that my literature teacher, who's apparently way older than me, was trying to seduce me, and that totally turned my world upside down. Here is a story of the weirdest experience I've ever had in my life. You see, my dad passed away a few years ago, and my mom has been the sole breadwinner for the years since then. But a few months ago, unfortunately, she lost her job, and we could no longer afford our life in the big city. As a matter of fact, Mom decided that it would be better for us to move in with her mom, my granny, in her tiny hometown. But there, we could start over again. Life in the small town was definitely different from the one we had gotten used to by living in the city. But it was way cheaper and also more peaceful. Besides, Mom could no longer be worried that Grams was living all alone in her old age and stuff. So while Mom was earning a living, Granny and I were looking after each other. But the new school, to be honest, was a separate story to tell. Everything and everybody was new to me, starting from classmates, of course. It's just, when you're 16 and you're new in town, it's pretty tough to get along with people. Things even get harder when you're forced to switch to another school in the middle of the year. The school hierarchy has already settled, and everybody is divided into cliques, so to speak. So yeah, there was no line of people who were dying to befriend me. Frankly speaking, even the teachers were kinda not really friendly, or at least one of them, a literature teacher, Mr. Maccabee. It was during my first week of school when he saw me and said something like, "Who do we have here?" And when he heard my last name and knew that I had been transferred from the city, it seemed to me that he became really interested in me. He tortured me during his lessons, trying to figure out whether I already knew something about To Kill a Mockingbird and the Scarlet Letter and stuff. So that by the end of the first lesson, I had clearly figured out that literature class was going to bring me lots of trouble. Fortunately, after his class, one girl came up to me and tried to sort of cheer me up, saying that Mr. Maccabee was really famous for his outstanding love of his subject. Hence, he thought that everybody also had to be sophisticated enough when it came to literature. And with great pleasure, he tortured and destroyed those who didn't meet his requirements. So I shouldn't really take this lunatic personally. It was Sherry who told me this, and later on we had lunch together and even became really good friends. But I wouldn't be telling this story right now if this friendship wasn't further screwed up. Just wait till you hear more about that. Mr. Maccabee continued to torture me every single lesson. But it's not even this that made me develop a total disgust toward him. I constantly caught his eyes on me. I have to admit that there would have been nothing surprising about this during literature class, but a few times I saw him staring at me during lunches, or right through the window of his classroom when I was in the schoolyard, for example. I tried not to pay attention to it at first because I had just been transferred here and a lot of people were looking at me from time to time. But when a whole month passed and he never stopped with his strange looks, I mean, like scary strange, taking into account his extra attention toward me during classes, I told Sherry about it. She said he was just creepy and tried to make a joke that he might have fallen in love with me and began teasing me that someday I might become Mrs. Maccabee and stuff. And I laughed, but also this joke turned out to be not that far from the truth. I already realized Mr. Maccabee was pretty stingy with good grades, but once, when I wrote an excellent paper on the American literature of the 30s and got a D on it, I decided it was time to deal with it. I waited till everybody left the classroom after another class of his and decidedly went up to his desk and demanded justification for such a low grade. I can't say what it was that I saw in his eyes, but a part of me thought that he had been waiting for me to come up to him. I tried to convince myself that I was mistaken, and that it was just that nobody had ever tried to argue with him about grades, and that he just got surprised that I did. But when he told me to come back and see him in that classroom after my classes, I couldn't shake Sherry's joke in my head about his feelings for me. Later on, when classes were over and I was about to go and see Mr. Maccabee, I felt really worried about it. Sherry might have also felt it too, 'cause she said that she'd wait for me for when I'm done, so we could go home together. And she once again mentioned the joke about his obsession with me, saying that if he decided to put his hands all over me, she'd be there to help me. I forced a smile and entered the classroom. Do you know what surprised me most? He practically didn't say a word about my essay. He looked through it very fast again and then said that he was completely mistaken and probably confused my writing with somebody else's and just gave me an A+. Ain't that strange for a teacher who used to be really strict and overbearing to agree with me on changing the grade of a project so fast? He complimented me about my general literature knowledge and said that he'd been following my studies during the past month and noticed that I was a brilliant pupil. Then he assumed that I had a really good literature teacher back in the city, or that maybe my parents might have been really great to instill a love of reading in me. I tried to be polite and say that my mom always really loved to read and that she even worked at the local library when she was young. Strangely enough, this information sort of filled my teacher with enthusiasm. He seemed to be happy having found out that about me. So I thought that since the deal with that grade of mine was already done, I'd better be leaving. And just as I was about to open the door to get myself out of that classroom, Mr. Maccabee suddenly asked whether my name was April because I was born in April. I said yes, and he said that he thought so from the very first moment he saw me, 'cause I looked like an April girl for him, which was supposed to be a compliment, I guess, though a strange one. Ever since that talk, his attitude toward me completely changed. He no longer tried to fail me or anything, but on the contrary, he gave me credit whenever I said a single word, and he was always smiley when he was talking to me. So it's no wonder that at some point, the rumors among my classmates began that somebody was Maccabee's favorite. Judging upon what Sherry told me about him, it was the first time he had ever been that nice to anybody. Of course, I was happy about the fact that I was easily getting good grades, but I didn't know that my new best friend would be so jealous of me for that. She once even asked me to write a paper for her in literature because she desperately needed an A for her final grade, and she was sure that I'd do it brilliantly. But for some strange reason, Mr. Maccabee caught her cheating. He said that he recognized my writing style and punished Sherry with a low grade. I, in turn, had to talk to him privately about my punishment after classes were over. Sherry got angry with me for that, so that she didn't sit with me during lunch, and right after that, I heard some other girls whispering to each other that I was sleeping with my literature teacher. Of course, I got furious with Sherry, but I thought that it was the stupid teacher who was practically ruining my life, being a pervert or something. I got so angry and decisive at the same time. I was ready to ask him directly why he treated me in such a special way. And when I went to that prearranged punishment talk, he looked so inspired and happy to see me. I even got lost. He was talking about my bright mind and that I shouldn't help my classmates by writing their essays for them. And at some point, he came up really close to me and started touching my hair. I felt like this was extremely wrong. So I shot out of that classroom and headed straight to the principal's office. I was in shock and trembling all over my body while telling him everything about Mr. Maccabee. Of course, they called my mom to school, and while she was on her way, I couldn't stop the tears from running down my face. As soon as Mom arrived and saw Mr. Maccabee, she seemed to look like she had just seen a ghost. As I found out afterward, he was sort of a ghost of Mom's past. It turned out that many years ago, Mr. Maccabee and my mom dated. While he was getting his degree at the university nearby, she worked here at the local library. My mom was very pretty, and he was very jealous. Once, a guy started paying attention to my mom, and Mr. Maccabee thought that she cheated on him, while Mom was way too proud to prove her innocence. They broke up, and very soon my mom met my dad. There was no magnificent wedding because, as people said, the bride was in an interesting position, and very soon afterward my parents moved to the city. Mr. Maccabee counted everything and assumed that I might have been his daughter, and it's been torturing him ever since. And later he met me, and I told him that I was born in April, and that made him think it over again. And that time he was touching my hair because he wanted to take a DNA test, and he apparently couldn't just ask me for a sample directly. It's just, he didn't have a clue that I was born at 7 months old, which made the man my mom married back then my real dad. Of course he apologized, like 1,000 times, and I could swear I saw how embarrassed and devastated he was about his terrible mistake. The next day I found out that he had quit his job and put his house up for sale. Apparently, this town was too small for him to live in, as if nothing had happened. Unfortunately, this whole thing is still affecting my reputation, and I still hear rumors about our romantic relationship from time to time. Sherry and I are still not talking to each other. In fact, she behaves as if I am nothing, and that makes me so sad. Thank God I have only slightly more than a year of school to go, and for this disaster to finally end. If you like my story, click the corresponding button, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel.